What's up, yo? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast where we teach you the cheat codes to the game of life. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red. I hope you're doing great wherever you are. And I'm super excited to bring you today's interview, which is my conversation with Philip and Julia Olson. Philip and Julia Olson are the very talented Emmy Award-winning hosts of 2 Cents, a PBS digital studio show that teaches personal finance to millennials and Gen Z. They are also the co-founders of The Art of Finance, a financial coaching and planning firm that specializes in helping creatives build a detailed roadmap for their financial futures. Julia, Philip, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have y'all. How are y'all doing?
We're doing great.
Doing good. Thanks for having us, Caption.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited about this interview. I've been watching many of your videos and giving you lots of thumbs up and actually learning a lot of things that I thought I knew a lot about, and then I realized that there was more learning to do. So thanks so much.
Always more to learn.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So we're gonna talk all about y'all's work and the awesome things that you're doing. But first, I would like to start with a story from your past. It can be from both of your past or, just one of y'all's past. But just something that is just a fun story to hear. Everybody likes a good story. So what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, life is just a bunch of stories strung together, right? That's all it is. So, okay, this is just something to kind of illustrate the fact that you just never know how your life is going to piece itself together, especially when you're young. But so growing up in my house, my parents, I have 2 wonderful parents, and they were super strict with me when it came to what I watched on TV. Very strict. Not so much behavioral strict, but just kind of the media intake, which I think is a little bit ahead of their time. I was growing up late 80s, early 90s, and the only thing I was allowed to watch was PBS shows. That's it. I didn't get Saturday morning cartoons. I didn't get nothing like that. And I would be jealous, all of my friends were watching these cool shows and I had to pretend like I would also watch them, but secretly I couldn't. Didn't.
Right.
But, it really got me into, I watched so much. I watched a lot of Nature and Nova and all these crazy shows, but I was a PBS kid. And then when I met Philip in college, we met when I was just a baby freshman in college. And one of the first things we sort of realized about each other was that his parents had been very similar with him. The only thing he was allowed to watch growing up really was PBS. That was it. So we kind of bonded over that. And then, fast forward 10 years after that, both of us were theater majors and grew up thinking, oh, we're going to be on the stage, we're going to be on TV. And then we end up as these financial professionals, which is a crazy story, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about later. But here we are in just this totally different world than we ever saw ourselves being in. And then we start making our own videos, kind of just as a gag to put online. And then someone at PBS reaches out to us and says, hey, what if we made a show about money? And we were just like, what? I cannot believe that. That is the coolest idea. And here we are now with our own PBS branded show, and we even won an Emmy from it. I always dreamed. Yeah, I always dreamed growing up that, I'd be on some TV show and then, I'd get to dress up and walk the red carpet and, thank my mother and win my Emmy.
Right.
But I have a real Emmy on my desk. It just goes to show you just never know. It's a crazy story.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and you deserve the Emmy. I mean, I'm not shocked by it, but I just, in my research, I didn't come across it. So
thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, y'all do great work. Great work. So I saw that y'all started, and I guess you made a few videos, and then you got picked up by PBS is kind of what it is sometimes presented as. But tell me about the journey of actually getting onto PBS, because it wasn't just like you made like a handful of videos and then
Oh
you got
no,
on, right?
not at all.
You never see the whole story, right? There's always so much more. Yeah. So as Julia said, so we both studied theater in college. Is how we met. We were, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up. Julia had been pretty much believing she was going to be a Broadway star since she was a young child, but we were struggling artists, living the actor dream for a number of years, and we just kind of ambled along. I was a theater teacher for a couple of years, teaching kids and directing children's shows. And after a while, we just kind of got burnt out on the struggling actor artist life, and I ended up transitioning into getting a job at a financial firm. A couple years later, Julia did too. And then we both started working in finance. Never would have seen that coming. We had no interest in this stuff really in college, but we ended up really loving it. It was so different than the artistic world we were in, at least at first. And we worked in that world for a couple of years, and the financial world can be really dry. It can be a lot of times filled with older people who might be a little out of touch or don't know how to connect to maybe people who are a little different like us. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to make our own content. Maybe we should make a podcast, maybe we should make a course, maybe we should make a video series or something. And unfortunately, at all the big companies that we worked at, you couldn't do anything like that. They wouldn't let you. They would forbid any sort of personal content because they were afraid of what you might say. And so in 2015, I launched my own financial company, a financial advisory business alone, and Julia eventually joined me. But we had this freedom finally to make our own stuff. And that was the first thing we did is we got a green screen in our guest bedroom, and I learned how to edit video software and, film ourselves as a totally made from scratch operation where we just started making these videos that were sort of educational, like how to get out of debt and, best ways to pay off student loans, that kind of stuff.
And we originally meant them to be like advertising basically for our firm, a brand new baby firm. So people can kind of watch the videos and get a sense of who we are, how we talk about money. And then, so they know what to expect if they reach out to us. Yeah.
So it's kind of, we're performers by training. I was a teacher for a number of years, so trying to use that teaching, that performing experience. And then, it was kind of a way to get the word out about our company. So we'd been doing that for, I want to say a year or a year and a half, something like that. We've been doing it for, I don't know, a while. It seemed like it's a lot of work, took tons and tons of time, but we kind of plugged it away. We eventually had someone help us with the videos, basically paid someone to help us edit it, and that sped it up a lot. But, we didn't have a lot of views. It wasn't a huge thing. We got, maybe a couple hundred views per thing. It was not really a big deal. And then, an old friend of Julia's just happened to see our show, I think on Facebook, an old theater friend, and reached out. Do you want to pick up the story?
Yeah, sure. Well, this acquaintance was my director in a production of Hamlet, like 6 years before any of this started. So just as a lesson, always be good to work with. Always be good to work with. Don't burn your bridges, And he was an editor on a PBS digital series. And so because he was friends with me on Facebook, he saw these kind of homemade videos that we were making. And so he reached out and was like, hey, I'm currently working on this PBS show. I don't have any creative control over it. I'm just an editor, but I know PBS is looking for more ideas, for more content to pitch as a show. What would you think about pitching them? And we were like, yeah, of course. So we went through the process of thinking about, what could our pilot episode be about? And then we went back and forth with PBS for a long time, like way longer than you would think, because you have legal contracts and all these things. And we ended up having to pay to make the pilot ourselves like we went through all these different rounds. And so finally, I mean, it was like a year and a half from when we first thought, let's pitch PBS, this show idea, to when we were actually got the green light to make it, because it just takes so much longer than you think. Sure. And so then that's when it finally got off the ground. And they said, yeah, we love the pilot. Okay, yes, let's fund this show, right? And so that was the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And the rest is history, right? So,
I suppose so. History in the making, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. So in regards to, I did a little bit of digging, and y'all had mentioned in, I believe it was a video interview, that you almost, or the offer was that PBS was going to have ownership of the content and the show itself, and then y'all decided to step back and say, no, we're going to fund it ourselves. Just tell me the thinking behind that as far as that goes.
Yeah, so we're both entrepreneurs. We've each started multiple businesses, and we understand kind of the long game. If you can make something really work, you wanna own it. You want to have some control. You don't want to have someone else tell you that you're not involved anymore or that it's canceled. And so when we first reached out to PBS with the idea, they said it sounds great, and here's the budget we'll give you, and this whole intellectual property is ours. And we said, oh man, that's not what we had in mind. We want to be, creators, and we want to have some stake in this if this succeeds. And back and forth with negotiations over months, we ended up essentially saying, we'll turn down the initial funding to make the pilot. Making a pilot is extremely expensive. We had to, rent out a studio and a crew and the editing, and the pilot turned out really good, but it takes some serious bucks. And we basically said, we'll pay for half of it, and the other married couple we make the show with, they put up the other half, and it's basically our baby. It's a product, it's a brand and a show that we own. PBS does own the episodes; they basically buy episodes from us, but it's our show, and we don't know what the life of this thing is, long term. But that was kind of our thinking, to have more skin in the game.
And also, it was, yes, all that's true, but we were honestly, I think, more motivated by just the anxiousness to get the pilot made, because it was taking forever for them to come up, with a number. And I think another thing that was in the original contract was, if they basically paid for this pilot and they turned us down, that they didn't actually want to make it, we could not shop around the idea to anyone else for 18 months. And we said, oh, no, like, we knew we had a great idea here, and there are other media companies out there. Like, obviously, we wanted it to be with PBS, and thank goodness it is. But if they didn't want it, then we wanted to be able to pick up and offer it to somebody else and see if they liked it. So honestly, those two things were the most in the front of my mind of like, I want to get this thing made soon. I don't want this to just languish on a desk somewhere. And I want to be able to shop around, because I really believe in the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I like that y'all were willing to, it almost sounds like walk away. Yeah, it sounds like walk away from PBS, even though, this is your dream company, right?
It was. It's true.
Absolutely. So, in that regard, you have created. Okay, first I want to ask, how are y'all so prolific in doing such high quality content on a weekly basis? I think I can't say enough about your show. I really can't. I love it.
Thank you.
And I think y'all are the perfect people to bring it to the world. So how are y'all able to pump out such excellent content every week?
Well, we don't anymore. we did have it as a weekly show at the beginning. It's now actually just once a month. Okay. The way we were able to do it originally is get a huge running head start. I mean, it takes close to a month just to write the script alone. Right. I mean, it takes another month to edit the thing. So, we're having to be 2 to 4 months lead time for any episode to be live. And, the 5 minutes or 7 minutes that every episode it has, 100 hours of work. So when we were first doing the show on a weekly basis, we had to basically have all of them almost completely finished before even the first one launched. We're not cranking these out, making one every week. That was definitely not the pattern. At the moment, we're usually writing 2 and filming 2 a month, something like that. That's, I don't know if that's prolific, but we're working hard.
No, I mean, you're doing the thing, and I mean, at the end of the day, I would prefer that you take your time on the content versus, rush something out and have something that's not high quality. And that's how I feel about my podcast. So, yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. So your business, I want to kind of pivot and talk about your business. And, you help artists with their personal finances because artists are usually pretty good at their art. They're not very good at managing their money. So just tell me about your business and why you chose to serve, artists over all others. And obviously you have a personal connection, but.
Yeah, well, that's part of the main thing. So it's kind of like you were saying, you gotta kind of find your niche, especially if you're trying to start something new today. You gotta find something specialized. You gotta find a hook. And so for us, we didn't just want to be that generic financial advising firm that looks like all the rest and everybody's wearing suits and it's a bunch of white guys playing golf and like that's the feel. And also that wasn't really us. And so when we started it was just me for about a year before our team started to grow. But we looked at and said, who do we want to serve that's not really being served? Who do we want to help that we can connect with on a personal level? And the answer just seemed so obvious that it was really artists and creatives. And so we launched that firm, focusing on helping creatives and artists because it didn't seem like really anybody was doing that as their primary focus. And we got a lot of raised eyebrows, frankly, at the beginning when I would tell people in the elevator or at my office, hey, we have a financial planning firm serving artists. They always would be like, okay, well, good luck with that. Sort of this conception that if you're creative, you're broke, I think was sort of the expectation. I think we've done a lot of good work to start to shift that understanding, at least with the people we work with. There's a lot of incredibly successful and thriving creatives that just sort of want help and a second pair of eyes. And a lot of creatives are just a little bit of education and empowerment away from being really awesome at money. It's not like you have to give up your ability to succeed at business and sell your soul to the devil if you want to be good at art. You really can do both. Julie and I both went to school for arts. We kind of had this expectation as creatives that you pretty much have to be bad at business and money. It's kind of almost like a mark of pride.
Right.
The starving artist is sort of the goal. And we're like, no, that sucks. We don't think everybody really wants that. And so there's such an internalized belief that to be a successful creative, to be a great musician, to be a great podcaster, to be a great designer, you can't have any muscle in the financial world. And that's just such a myth. And so that's mostly what we're doing is dispelling people from that myth and helping them see you can be a boss of both, really.
Absolutely. That's great. And when you meet, I imagine, being in Austin, you meet a lot of artists, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
So when you meet artists and you just want to help them, right? I mean, everyone I know that works not everyone, but the ones that are good that work in the financial world just really want to help people to have a better life. And so what free advice do you give them just off the bat, just kind of telling them like, look, here's just something you need to know. So you don't end up, in a fetal position crying on your kitchen floor.
Well, I think we've done really good work. We used to give a lot of free advice when we were first out in the biz, and now we don't give a ton. But I would say like when we're talking about philosophical ideas that are kind of bedrocks for us and bedrocks for people who have a stable and peaceful financial life, it's I mean, it's pretty much down to just a couple of things. And the first one is like, you have to pay attention to your money. You have to pay attention. It does not and should not consume your life. It shouldn't. But you need to pay attention or it's just going to walk away, right? Like that's just how it works. I like to use the analogy that like every dollar you earn is a soldier. It's coming to you ready and trained to go out into the world and do something good for you, and build something. And, you know, but if you don't take a leadership position, they're going to mutiny and you're going to have a serious mess on your hands. So it's up to you to become like kind of go on the journey of becoming like the best general that you can. So if you think about it like that, that puts you in the commander position. So that's one thing. The second thing is if you want to create anything, like if you want to create wealth for yourself, if you want to get out of debt, the thing you have to focus on first is creating a big gap between your spending and your income. That's it. Because that's where your financial power is held. That's it. So you have to live below your means. You can't do anything if you don't, period. And then I would say finally that being really good at money doesn't actually require a ton of math. I struggled with math in school all throughout all my schooling. It just did not come naturally to me. And the good news is, in order to be really good at money, all you need is to know how to subtract and add and multiply, divide. That's it. You don't need any other math skills than that. And guess what? I use a calculator all day, every day. I don't do any math in my head. I just don't. So it doesn't take a lot of math. What being good at money really takes is a good load of self-awareness, being able to understand how and why you do the things you do. That is going to give you a ton of financial power in the long term because we're emotional beings. We make money. There's no such thing as a logical money decision. There isn't. Emotions are always in the picture because we're not computers, right? We're human beings. That's how we're made. And so if we can come to terms with how we feel, what we're trying to get when we spend our money in this way or that way, digging into that story and asking yourself tougher questions of like, well, why did I really do this? Or why did I buy this? Why did I feel like I needed this? Why? Until you get down to the nut of it. That is super, super powerful information, even more powerful than like, should I put money into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA? Like that's really where your power is going to be found.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is it? Phil, did you want to add anything to that?
That was great. Nothing to add.
I love it. Fantastic. Good stuff. So y'all are a married couple, which I think is fantastic that y'all are, working together on mission together. You have a child together. Y'all got married at the age of 20, which is,
Yes. We did.
It's young. It's not,
It is.
Yes. I mean, it worked out for us, but it's not necessarily something I would recommend for most people. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's worked out really well. And so I just want to tap into your minds about like, what is the advice that you give, whether it's 20-year-olds or people younger or even older, about finding a life partner? Because it looks like both of y'all just struck gold.
It's true. I mean, even now, like tomorrow, we'll be married for 14 years. So
tomorrow.
Tomorrow's our 14-year anniversary. And even now, we really do feel just incredibly lucky. But that's not to say we haven't put in a ton of work to make this work, because over such a long period of time, who I am now at 34 is very different than who I was at 20. Same thing with Philip. We have become different people, and that can be very stressful, going through all sorts of changes. And I'm sure we have many, many changes ahead of us. But, I try not to dispense too much relationship advice,
Okay.
because I feel like the minute you try and put yourself on a pedestal as like some relationship expert, like it all
Sure.
comes crashing down. But I will say, if I can give two pieces of advice for people who are trying to see, like, what am I really looking for in a life partner that can really make it stick, right? I think for me, something I found in Philip that I thankfully was super blessed to also see in my dad when I was growing up is a deep sense of integrity.
Hmm.
Just this feeling of like, this guy who I'm going to be with, he's just going to do the right thing 9 times out of 10. Like and even if he doesn't do the right thing, he's going to realize it and like
Sure.
come around, right? Like nobody's perfect, but he's just driven by this really deep inner sense of integrity. And that is something you can work with long term. And that has not changed, right, in him at all. And that is something I just saw. I said, okay, if I'm going to hitch my wagon to somebody for the long term, they better have a deep sense of integrity about themselves and how they treat the people around them. And that is like a bedrock foundation that you can build on. And then secondly, is you need to find somebody who's willing to put in work with you, because
Hmm.
relationships are work. Like you fly high on those, connection butterfly vibes. Those last you like a year and a half, two,
Correct.
if you're lucky, right? And then it gets hard and you're trying to communicate things and you're not doing it very well. And why can't they just understand you? Like, the closer you get to somebody, the more and more flaws you see. It's just inevitable. And so finding somebody who's willing to go to therapy with you, willing to come back and apologize and say, hey, I did wrong. Here's what happened. I'm sorry. Like somebody who can be humble and be willing to take the hit when it's theirs to take. Those are like, I don't know how people can create a solid life partnership if those two things aren't in place.
Yeah, one of the smartest in hindsight things we did very early in our relationship is we started going to couples therapy very early into our marriage, and we've been going for like 10 years
Oh,
or
more than
11
that.
years now.
Yeah.
We've been going for a super long time. We started going, as many couples do, I think, when there's difficulty and there's things you can't fix and you're feeling like you're in crisis. But then we just kept going. We actually had some friends who said,
Hmm.
if I could go see this counselor every day, I would. And I was just scratching my head and saying, why would you do that? Because I always thought of therapy or counseling as like, it's like the emergency room. You only go there if
Yeah.
things are, you're cheating on your spouse, or, there's just absolute crisis. And we've really come to see it as preventative maintenance. It's just,
Yeah.
and it's honestly somewhat enjoyable. It's like getting a massage, like you're having someone really listen to you and who helps you hear the other person and the other person hear you in ways you can't do on your own very well. I think that's probably the best investment we've made in our relationship over our years, was having that and keeping that.
Yeah, and I would say these two things, like kind of the integrity piece and the work piece, that is true for any life partner you have. Your romantic partner is not the only life partner you'll have. I have two best friends, and they, the more I think about it, they're the same way, like willing to put in the work, have deep integrity, like the people who really support your whole life. Those are the types of
Yes.
people that you want to do your best to attract and maintain.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you read my mind because that was one of my other questions is how do you pick a good friend? So,
Yeah,
that's
just
fantastic.
as important. I mean, so much of our culture is focused on like getting a romantic partner. And I mean, obviously it's wonderful when you can and do find that, but your romantic partner can't and shouldn't be everything to you in your
Hmm.
whole life. They can't. It's way
Right.
too much pressure to put on one person. So like, yeah, it's super important that you have deep, abiding friendships and that you cultivate those over time because, yeah, it takes a village to raise a person. And that's true with a kid. And it's true still kind of like in your adulthood. You need a group of people to support you.
Hmm. Absolutely. And speaking of kids, y'all have one.
We
And
do.
how old is your daughter?
She just turned 3, and she is happy to tell you if you ask her. She is thrilled about that fact.
Yeah, that's a fun age. Awesome. What is it? So you've waited till, you were in your 30s to have kids, and you were married at 20. Why did y'all wait so long?
Great
We
question.
were smart.
Hey, it was the right choice for us.
It's true.
We were married so young, and we feel one of the advantages of that is that we could be married a pretty long time and then still have children before, we kind of get too old, high up in age. And so we had a long season of, sort of childless marriage. And, I was never really even completely convinced I wanted to have children or have our own biological children. I thought about a lot of things I think people think about when they're trying to make that decision of, it seems like a ton of work and a ton of money, and does the world really need more children? And, maybe I could just be happier without that. And I was probably on the fence for a long time. I think, Julia, you always knew you wanted to be a mom, but.
Well, I would say I could have also not been. It wasn't,
Okay.
It was definitely not a driving force in my
Right.
life. Like, I have to do this. It just felt like something I could do well if I chose to do it.
I think for quite a while we got our identity from other things, mostly career stuff, being a good friend, being a good business owner, being a good artist. That was kind of what we focused on. Early in my 30s, maybe 3-4 years ago, I kind of had a couple of just sort of personal breakthroughs and kind of like awakenings to some things about, I rediscovered becoming an athletic person again and rediscovered my love for musical art. And another one of those was I think I'm ready to take the plunge and do this scary thing of becoming a parent. And so, yeah, I think Julia was in a ready place. And I finally said, I think I'm in a ready place too. And looking back, it's been an incredible joy and an incredibly difficult, challenging thing at the same time, as parenting, I think, is for everyone. But, I think it's just a very, very happy part of our lives having her with us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And how has that helped you financially, I guess, waiting to have a child later versus, hey, we're 22, 23, we're married, let's have a kid.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tough because I don't want to frame having a children as being a primarily financial decision.
Right,
it shouldn't be. Like, I get so many people who come to me and they're like, I don't know if I can afford to have a kid. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like,
Right.
Please don't think about it that way. Of course, there are financial implications to having a child, but it's not like they just pop out into the world with an exact price tag attached. Like, you're in control here. You get to determine how you go about funding this kid's life, right? And you don't have to, there's lots of options and wiggle room. I will say, though, something that helped us in creating a space of slightly lesser stress bringing a kid into the world is being in a strong financial position. We had no debt besides our mortgage. We had a business that was thriving, because with businesses, when you start them, they act just like kids. At the beginning of a business, they are desperate. They can't do anything for themselves. They can't do absolutely anything, and they don't produce anything. All they do is take your resources. That's it. And that's natural, actually, and normal. Like, I think a lot of people are under this impression that a business is just like a light switch that you just turn on or off, and then it just produces something of value. And it's like, no. This is like another life you're bringing into the world. And for a long time, it cannot do anything on its own. You are its primary source of everything. And so our business was at a stage where it was like, okay, it can walk by itself. We are consistently profitable. I can now choose who I do and don't take on as clients, so that we were in a position where I could just not work for a while, and it wouldn't impact the business that much. Like, our cash flows were steady. So that was huge. Having a business, waiting long enough to have a business or have our income in a place that was very stable and could definitely handle a 3-month turnoff, essentially, which is what we did. And then, having also being able to afford childcare is huge, because childcare is very expensive. That's like the most shocking thing. It's like, oh boy, this is very expensive. And so it helped being kind of slightly older, I guess, and being able to afford those things easily.
Well, to think back on that time period, to go back to your question, Caption, of like how did waiting help us? We wandered around in the wilderness for quite a while with our careers, trying to decide what we were going to be when we grew up. Julia had a online vintage store for years, and then she was a mortgage lender for years, and she was a kind of an executive assistant for a household for years, and worked in retail. And I had my own kind of journey of bopping. I didn't ever hold down a job for more than 2 years. I was constantly changing, and for a while, Julia would be the primary breadwinner, and I'd go and try and start something that had no profit in it, and then I'd be the breadwinner, and she'd go and try and start something new, and we go back and forth, and like the fact that we didn't have any children at that point made it less stressful, less risky in a way for us to just go out and take a chance. You can just take more chances when you don't have anyone relying on you or have fewer people relying on you. Is that enough reason to delay having children? Not necessarily. If it was very important to us at the time, we probably would have done things different. It just wasn't very important to us back then. And looking back, could we have wandered through the wilderness for 10 years to arrive where we are today with children at such a young age? I don't know. I just know it would have been harder. It definitely would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, it worked out well. I mean, raising a kid and running a business at the same time, fresh, like you said, the thought of that just like makes me.
It's like having triplets.
It is. It's so true. So I feel like, when our daughter came into the world, we had a 5-year-old or like a 4-year-old, and then we had a newborn. Yes. It's like, okay, this 4-year-old can talk, it can walk, it can get a snack, it can sort of feed itself. Like, okay, we're good to add. So yeah, that helps.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I'm getting so much good information out of y'all, and I'm really digging it. As you have run a business, as you have raised a child and had success in just many endeavors, having a YouTube channel and whatnot, you've shared a lot of things, but what is something that you haven't shared as far as principles and habits that have helped y'all become successful, individually or collectively?
Ooh, okay. Gonna just grab something here. Something I haven't shared. I would say, especially, speaking to your younger audience in particular, so much of the work I did when I was younger, like I was a waiter for a number of years, and I, parked cars as a valet and was a barista and all these other kind of jobs you don't think will ever end up mattering very much. In hindsight, now in my 30s, I really, really think that so much of those kind of thankless jobs or entry-level jobs or work I thought that didn't matter very much was directly building my tool set of my professional life when I grew up. I thought I just had to coast through this, make a few bucks, it's not going to really matter how hard I work or how good of a job I do. And looking back, and the things I did well, I have just gotten better and better at. And the things I took shortcuts and did in a lazy manner or just kind of phoned in, they kind of ended up coming back to make things harder for me in some ways. And I had to kind of adapt and build a new skill set. So I would say, yeah, that's probably a lesson I learned, is like the nothing jobs you get, no matter how menial or pointless it will be, if I could have applied myself to those even 15% more than I did, I know it would be helping me now, even though I'm not in that industry or at that company anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Building blocks, definitely.
Yeah. I would say, like, for me, this is something I never heard growing up ever as being something of value. Like, And that's learning how to really take care of yourself. I'm
Yeah.
glad that this is now kind of in the zeitgeist, right? Like it's all over social media, like hashtag self-care. It's like, but behind like the manicures or like whatever. I mean, and truly, I'm 34 years old and I feel like I'm just now, and the pandemic really helped force me to get really good at taking care of myself. Because if I didn't, I mean, I'm an extrovert. I love, being around a bunch of people. If I had not taken super care of myself, I would have just imploded. Like my mental health would have just given up on me. And so really focusing on figuring out how is my like personal cup refilled? What does that for me? And making sure that I'm proactively building in time pretty much every week to do those things is essential. Because if you want to build anything of worth, if you want to build a great relationship, if you want to build a great business, if you want to build great content, it takes energy. And that energy doesn't come from nowhere. It has to be created through choices that you make, right? And so I found that if I can be better about making choices that help create energy for me, even though they're not quote unquote productive, it's basically adding fuel to my fire so that when I do come into work, when I do think about when I am writing that next script, I have mental energy. I have, emotional energy to do those things and make something good, which I always thought like taking care of yourself and taking time for yourself was like self-indulgent.
What does that look like for you?
Oh, Philip just asked, what does that look like for me? And I think for me, it looks like having one-on-one time with really close friends. That's super energizing for me. Exercising, or just like joyfully moving my body in a way that I love. That also is super good for me. And making something like cooking or baking bread or painting, like creating something outside of me. All three of those things are the main drivers for what really fills my cup. And so like when I look at my Google Calendar every week, and Philip's really good at helping support me with this. I'm like, hey, am I doing these? And is it not just like filled with work and taking care of our daughter? Like, where are my blocks for me to fill my tank? So highly recommend that you start that habit young. That will come back to you a million times over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm an extrovert as well. So
yeah,
I
it's
was
hard.
feeling all of it when you were talking about the pandemic, and
So
it's been a rough.
hard. It's been rough. Yeah. But it makes you so much more appreciative now that things are coming back. I'm fully vaccinated and it feels amazing just to like sit with my friend and not worry, it feels great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, it takes time and energy to create the content. Y'all have such great analogies and examples. And I mean, when I watched that, the one on budgeting where you were referencing the soldiers, my head kind of exploded a little bit out of the left side and the right side a little bit as well. But so how do you sharpen that tool? Because everybody wants to be clever, everybody wants to be witty, and it serves you in all aspects of your life. So how do y'all develop that muscle? Because it's not something that you just made, right? Or you just have naturally. There is natural ability, but
I guess that's a tough question. I can just say because that is something that's really, I think, important to our brand, is that so many financial concepts feel like they're so vague. They're just in a cloud. You can't see them. And so whenever I'm trying to figure out how to explain something, I think of it visually, of like, what's a visual representation of something? Like, for example, one that I'm super proud of that was in our pilot was thinking about the concept of depreciation as ice cream. So,
Yes.
you know, a fresh ice cream, like you will pay good money for that. A melted ice cream, you will not pay good money for that, right? And I just had to think, I was like, okay, this is something that decreases over time and I will pay less for it later than I will now. What is like a visual representation of that I can connect to? And I just thought of ice cream, and trust me, that well of inspiration is not always there. Sometimes I just have to write in something and just think about it for a little bit. I don't really have a method.
It comes, I would say, like the more we practice it, it just becomes more natural. So, you know, before I got into finance 10 years ago, I was leading children's acting classes and acting camps. And one thing I found that endeared me to children was to not talk above them, not like try to impress them with lingo or slang or advanced concepts that they can't really make sense of. I mean, who likes that? When I see stuff all the time still as an adult, as a professional adult, where I'm like, you're talking like with 5 levels of understanding that I don't have, and it's annoying. Like it just ends up irritating me and makes me feel dumb. And that's like, what's the point of that if you're trying to educate? So we're always trying to find what's a very easy way into an idea, what's something everybody understands, to illustrate something abstract, because so much of financial stuff and business stuff is abstract. You can't touch a ledger, you can't touch a ratio. These aren't physical things that we understand on that level. They're all in our head, and anything you can do to get into that. So like with Julia's metaphor, everybody knows what a melting cone of ice cream looks like. Yeah. And if you can have an emotional feeling about that, right? It's like, oh, that's kind of gross, and it's kind of a bummer. Like you have these emotional tags. And so when we say, okay, well, a depreciating asset like a car is kind of like that, now we found a way in. And so honestly, a lot of our script writing is, how can we use a visual? How can we come up with a creative metaphor or analogy for this? Because just on its own, without that, it's just too dry. It needs something in there to kind of grease the wheels and help someone who we always want every episode we air of 2 cents. And honestly, every client we ever meet with on a personal basis, to be able to totally get what we're talking about with no knowledge in advance at all. Like when I talk to clients one-on-one, I always check in. Do you know what an IRA is? Do you know what a mutual fund is? I don't want to assume, because it's just so aggravating if someone goes down a rabbit trail of understanding that you're not going along with them on. So for 2 cents, we just try to do the same thing. And, we just did one on short selling that I think is a fairly complicated and advanced process.
Great video, by the way.
Thank you. So we had to repeatedly stop to explain things like, here's why it's even called a short, and here's how you can even make money when something goes down, and here's the origin of this thing, and like a lot of different ways to get into it. One of the visuals I loved in that is that the original short selling contract of all time was done through a series of hand slapping gestures on a bridge in Amsterdam. I'm like, that's totally interesting. I had no idea. Now this is kind of somewhat fun and a little bit playful. Let's start with that. And then let's talk about, and he's trying to short sell the biggest company in the world and the only company stock that exists. That's kind of interesting. He's spreading lies about why the company will do badly. And so sometimes it's metaphors. Sometimes, as Julia says, it's just visuals, not necessarily a metaphor. We want this to be something that someone in their 50s can learn from, and someone that's 10 can learn from. Some of our earliest fans we loved hearing from were in elementary school, and we're like, sweet, so glad you're learning about budgeting and Social Security at this age. You'll be ahead of the curve.
That's fantastic. Well, we're coming up on time, and I would love to talk to you all more, but I wanted to be respectful of that. As you reference kids, I wanted to make sure to get this in here, because you mentioned something in an interview that said the danger of success theater, and could y'all speak to that, because that is a real thing in today's society, and it's everywhere.
Oh gosh, it's so true. I mean, success theater is, I will say.
Can you define what that means?
Yes.
Well, sure. I guess. Well, the way when I think about it, it's like, it's a front. I mean, there's a term for it. I mean, you're fronting, right? Like, you put up this you take energy to display a image of yourself out in the world through how you dress, what you post about, where you go, all of that would lead someone to infer that you have, I would say, more money and more peace than you do. I think that's kind of what we mean by success theater. And I'll say that's been around for as long as humans have been around. Like, this is not anything new. We want to project a feeling of power and security so we don't get picked on. Right? That's like so deep in our reptilian brain. But now what's dangerous, I think, and so much more dangerous, is that we now have so many easy avenues to project this, of course, through things like social media, right? It only takes a free click of a button to help create a fantasy, right? Something that's not really real. And what it does is it can really mess with our perception of where we are in relation to everyone else. And when you feel behind, quote unquote, based on pictures you see on an app, and that makes you feel behind, that can lead to stress and burnout and overspending and so many things. And so it's a danger, and I really worry about it, especially for younger kids now who have access to things that I just didn't have access to back then. It would have been, I mean, it's already hard enough, and it's, I think, going to be made much harder to try and live your life in such a way where you kind of have some blinders on, where it's like, I'm running my race. I don't know what anyone else's balance sheet really looks like, because I can tell you, as someone who looks at the real numbers behind people's lives, you have no idea what's going on, what that car actually cost them, or the fact that, you just don't know, right? And so far better to just say, I don't know, and I don't need to know. It doesn't matter. You got to make choices for your own journey that are in your own self-interest, and try as much as you can to tame your FOMO, because those images that other people are projecting 9.5 times out of 10 aren't really telling you the truth.
Yeah, that's something we can definitely speak to as financial planners, that not everybody gets to see. Is that big house and that BMW and the Land Rover are almost always hiding something or compensating for the fact that this person is up to their eyeballs in debt, or they have a failing business, or they failed to save. And the image of wealth is not wealth. It's so easy to fall for that. But we look under the hood, and the wealthy people don't tend to show it off as much, because it just makes you a target. It's actually, I think, generally not a great thing to be bragging about how much wealth you have, because people will come for you. So you kind of want to keep it on the DL and not make a big deal about it. People make a big deal out of, are probably just trying to show off or
sell something.
Yeah, they're usually selling you something most of the time. But at the same time, like, I vividly remember when I fell victim to this. So as an artist, success is not really in the form of, fancy cars and jewelry, because artists don't tend to have a lot of money. And I didn't really think about that much when I was younger. But when I got into the financial world, here's all these people, and just success theater is everywhere in the entrepreneur world and the finance world. And, everyone has super nice tailored suits, and they're driving their luxury cars, and they have their very fancy house in the very fancy part of Austin. And I was like, I think I have to do this so people won't think that I'm a fraud, or people will think that I'm, a newbie or whatever. I felt very insecure about it. And so I financed the first and only car I'd ever financed, a luxury sports car. I'm not even a car guy, but I felt like I got to do this. I, showed it off to all of my colleagues, and I thought this would make me more successful. This would attract whatever, clients to me or whatever. It didn't end up helping me in business in any way. It ended up being a completely idiotic financial move. Lost a lot of money when I sold it later. And I was like, what was I thinking? Like, I was trying to pretend I was someone other than I am. And it just ended up biting me. The people that really impress us as financial planners are people who are kind of like successful under the radar. Like that's really cool. If you can,
and they're generous.
oh yeah, we haven't touched that at all. But like people who have generosity built into their financial plan, we decided 2 years ago, and we've always kept it as a substantial percentage of our income to be generous with. That to me, that's wealth. That's success. Whatever car you drive or what brand of stuff you have, that doesn't matter. It's how generous you are. Are you prudent? Are you frugal? Are you thoughtful with your money? Like that's success in our opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. That's a great place to end. Generosity and just being humble. It's humility is a very rare characteristic. It seems these days. So
that's very true. For some reason, it's not. That having the ability to be humble while not be self-deprecating, I think there's a big difference. You can be humble, but then there's kind of like this fake humility that's going around, which I am not about. Sure. But really being able to say like, hey, my success, and I would call myself a successful person, is due to like maybe 50% of my work. And it's also just 50% luck. Like I didn't have, there's so many things that I just did not control in my life, who I was born to, where I grew up, all these things that like have made it easier for me to create this life. I think noticing that and calling that out, it can't help you but be like, okay, I can take credit for where credit is due, but like, let's be real. My life is not all due to my hard work. So I think that can really help.
Absolutely. And I love the way that y'all are paying it forward. And I wish I could go into all of that, but I'll tag your website so people can see for themselves. Thank you so much for your time. What I like to do at the very end of my interviews is I like to do a little freestyle rap.
I am ready for this.
All right, cool. All right, here we go. Yo, check. Phil and Julia, they are not fooling you. They are just coming with the art of finance. It's not about chance. It's about making the future good for yourself. Create that wealth. And that's what I say. Know the biz. It's PBS kids. That's how they live. Up on the screen, up on the scene, teaching a bunch of kids and also adults a whole bunch of things so they could get right with their money. Yo, they just hungry to make that change and just rearrange the city and the state and the whole freaking world that we live in. And that's what they flipping, a whole bunch of videos about short selling and also budgeting. You just gotta love it when you see things up on the screen that are beautiful and usual, a whole bunch of thinking, a whole bunch of back and forth. Yo, they just bringing a whole bunch of things up in the scripts. Yo, they just flip things all the time, straight from the mind. They need a runway so they could come through and put it on out. No freaking doubt. They did a bunch of things that teach the people all around. Art of finance is not the thing that you freaking need to leave alone. You need to understand it is an art. And you gotta create, you just gotta make as an artist, or not even that. I come straight through. I'm speaking of raps, how you gotta budget. That's what I'm saying. Pay attention to all of your soldiers so you can have money when you get older. And that's what I'm saying. A whole bunch of empowerment. That's what they doing. Just straight spewing the good things. A whole bunch of ideas. Put it all together like it's IKEA. That's what I'm saying. Yo, they just care. They are self-aware and understand why. That's how you get up high with your money. And they keep on doing it. Yo, come through. They just moving with integrity and a whole bunch of work. That's what they do. They come through and search for good friends to be lifelong with. And that's what I say. They bring in the strongest ideas straight to you. Don't come through and be in the theater called a bunch of showing off. You can't be a boss if you're throwing away your money like that. Just be under the radar, and that's what I say. Come straight through. It's a good day to talk to them, and that's what I send. A whole bunch of love straight from the mind. That's what I say with a freestyle rhyme, and that's it right now. End of my time. All right.
That was pretty next level.
I tried. Y'all gave me a lot to work with, so there it is. Is our
We'll never have a podcast interview with freestyle rap. That I don't think so.
Never.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I tried. I was just like, there were so many things to pull from, and I was like, whoa. I'm drinking from a fire hose. So
that's some skill.
That is some skill.
Multi-talent.
Thank you. Well, anyhow, speaking of multi-talent, y'all were born for this. You really were.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
No, I'm fantastic. Top 5. I read that somewhere. Top 5 YouTube channels on finance, or
maybe.
I'm sure someone in the world has said that. Someone on the internet probably feels that way.
Yeah. No, I think just based on metrics. But anyways, every single episode is worth checking out. I am going through them as I, peruse my life, and I just appreciate what y'all are putting out in the world. So how can people connect with y'all online?
Yeah, so we're not really on social media that much. So we do go into the comments of our show every time a new episode comes out. And so, yeah, if folks want to check us out at 2 Cents PBS on YouTube or on the pbs.org. Yeah, our company is The Art of Finance in Austin, Texas, and we meet folks all the way from millionaires to people who are just starting to try and get out of debt or scrape together a couple bucks. We got something for everybody, and it's very accessible and cheap if you're just getting started. And that's probably it. Yeah, we don't have a whole bunch of handles.
Cool. Well, you had the right ones, and that's what matters. So thank y'all so much for joining me and sharing this information. And I have so many artist friends I need to send your way because they are not doing well.
Yeah,
but
they need some love. Yeah, we're doing our thing. Well, thanks for having us on. This was so fun.
Absolutely. All right. Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great rest of the day. And just thank you so much for everything.
You too. All right. Take care, Caption.
All right. So that's all I got for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from it. And if you enjoyed this interview, don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss future episodes. Also, if you are enjoying this podcast, please rate and review it in Apple Podcasts. That helps a great deal in getting high quality guests and also spreading the word. All right, so that's all I got for this time. Until next time, peace.